Did the Knights Templar discover a great treasure here in Jerusalem? Did they bring it back to Europe and become more powerful than the Pope himself? And when the French king ordered their arrest and seizure of their assets, why was there no treasure to be found? Where had it gone, and where is it today?
There's absolutely no question that the Templars had a huge amount of treasure. The question is, where did it go? Who took it?
There is a chance that they found the Ark of the Covenant. That's the big one that people talk about. They may have found a menorah. They may have found documents, heretical documents, early Gospels, alternative histories.
I would say there's a very strong probability that much of what the Templars hid has remained hidden.
This is the shape of Rosslyn Chapel, and in the vaults are buried the Ark of the Covenant and the Holy of Holies.
You can call it the Grail pointer. Attach a plumb line to it, drop it straight down, and does that tell us where the Grail is hidden?
To date, I think everybody says that King Tut's tomb is the most famous treasure that was ever found. And I think we have something much more valuable on Oak Island.
For thousands of years now, Jerusalem has been a city of power, of majesty and turmoil, a frenetic melting pot, if you will, of religions and beliefs that continue to this very day. When the man they called the Messiah walked these streets, the heart of the city was the Temple of Jerusalem, housing the great treasures of Solomon and perhaps even the Ark of the Covenant itself.
The temple had been sacked twice before and rebuilt. Then in 70 AD, the Roman army, under General Titus, leveled the city, burnt it to the ground, and looted whatever great treasures it could lay its hands on. The Arch of Titus in Rome clearly shows the triumphal army proudly carrying sacred Jewish artifacts out of the city, including the menorah, the seven-branched candelabra.
So, what is the great mystery about this treasure? Well, the interesting thing was that the temple priests feared such a brutal attack would happen and cleverly hid the treasure in secret stashes underground. We know this because on the Copper Scroll, which was part of the Dead Sea Scrolls found in Qumran in the 1950s, the priests had detailed exactly what they'd buried and where. Now, fast forward about 1,000 years to 1119, and a group of French noblemen arrive here in Jerusalem on a secret mission. Today, we know them as the Knights Templar, and many believe they came here to find that hidden treasure. What were the Templars doing in Jerusalem?
The Knights Templars originally were tasked with protecting pilgrims, but what they actually do when they get there, and it's recorded, is they spend the first, I think, 8 years excavating Solomon's Mount and the stables that were built under the temple. So they spend a lot of time digging.
So what you're suggesting, Rob, then, was that they were tasked with protecting the pilgrims, but yes, you're suggesting that maybe that's not exactly what they were doing.
They seem to have had an ulterior motive.
Do you think they were looking for this treasure?
I think they were more interested in knowledge and information rather than cash and money. Although, of course, if they're looking for the Ark of the Covenant, which as a military order is something you really want because of its power to defeat an army's enemies, you can see there's a motivation there, but there's no specific evidence that's what they were after.
One of the things they may have been looking for was the semi-legendary Lance of Longinus, the weapon which, if you held it, would make you conqueror of all your enemies. It was said, in its Christianized form, to have been the spear which the centurion used to pierce the side of Christ at the crucifixion. It was something with an enormous intrinsic value, and they dug and hunted and looked for it. They were also, of course, looking for Solomon's wealth, which was believed to have been hidden under the temple. And there are tales of secret passages leading from below the temple out towards this repository of what was later to become Templar treasure, but which was originally thought to be Solomon's treasure.
But the big question is, did the Templars find it? I'd agreed to meet with an Israeli archaeologist who has spent years excavating beneath Jerusalem looking for the temple treasures. Dr. Shimon Gibson thinks it's a possibility that the high priests did bury their most sacred items, which the Templars then came searching for over 1,000 years later.
I would think it's quite logical that if you know that the Babylonians are hammering at the doors of the city, the gates of the city, they want to come in and they want to pillage and rape and destroy, that you're going to hide it away somewhere. And that means that one has to think about subterranean spaces beneath Jerusalem. This is where you hid things. If you had an enormous amount of money, if you had some treasure, you would find some subterranean space and you would hide it there.
Is it conceivable that there might well be treasure literally beneath us now as we speak?
Everything's possible in Jerusalem, I'll tell you. Whenever they excavate in different parts of Jerusalem, something is found. A couple of years ago, a colleague of mine was excavating near the Temple Mount and came across a hoard of gold coins from the year 613. And it was exciting. And I could see in her eyes, you know, how excited she was. You know, yes, she's a scientist and she's doing her archaeological work and everything should be of interest, but you could see the glint in her eye, you know, when she was describing to me the discovery of these beautiful gold coins.
Wonderful.
From the year 613.
If the Templars did find significant treasures here in Jerusalem, what happened?
Big if.
Yes, absolutely. If they did, we certainly know they became very wealthy. What then happened to the treasure?
I don't know. I mean, it's a big leap from Jerusalem to, you know, the Templar activities back in Europe. All I can say is that they did become wealthy. They were in charge of the Temple Mount when they were in Jerusalem, and I would suppose that if they were going to be rebuilding and bringing the Temple Mount back to its former glory from their perspective by re-erecting the Temple of Solomon, that they would also have sought after any hidden treasures there.
So, it's possible that the Templars went to Jerusalem on a specific mission to actually find this buried treasure. But did they succeed? What we do know is that when they left Jerusalem and came back to Europe, the order was extraordinarily wealthy and powerful. Whatever they'd found in Jerusalem made them, as one commentator from the time said, more powerful than the Pope. An enviable but also dangerous position to be in.
They went back to Europe and just increased in power, increased in numbers, and became incredibly powerful and incredibly arrogant and incredibly rich.
But could it be that the Knights Templars discovered a treasure map? Could it be that simple? And we know that one existed. It was called the Copper Scroll. It's part of the Dead Sea Scrolls, and it listed all the gold and silver they didn't want to lose by looters, so they hid it in crevices and caves, apparently around Jerusalem. If that is what they discovered, then that is the best explanation as to how this order came into its wealth.
Because they were knights and armoured, they were very good for looking after people's money. And they could lend money. And that's what ultimately got them into trouble, was the King of France, Philip, owed them a lot of money and was broke, and he saw them as an opportunity to seize their wealth.
They were basically the biggest institution in medieval Europe after the church itself. They were just everywhere. You would find Templar properties. They were just, absolutely ubiquitous in the society. Very, very powerful for 200 years. And then they had this sort of sudden and dramatic downfall.
As the Knights Templar grew in both power and wealth, so did the opposition against them, including the French king, who was desperate to try and get his hands on whatever treasures they'd brought back from Jerusalem. In the end, King Philip IV of France made a preemptive strike, sending out orders for the arrest of all Templars and the seizure of their treasures and assets. The day would be remembered in infamy. Friday the 13th, 1307.
So you can see them now in all the Templar commanderies. Philip le Bel, Philip IV, has given orders that the Templar commanderies have got to be attacked simultaneously. See, Philip is no fool. He's no hero, but he's no fool. He knows that if he fails to get the Templars, by thunder, they'll get him. They are not men to mess with. If you are going to strike a blow against the Templars, then you either strike a fatal blow or you prepare to die as soon as they've got up again. Now, what we've got the scene here is, in a way, a very strange historical parallel to what happened in the temple at Jerusalem when the Romans attacked. You've got these men of great dignity as well as great strength and courage, and they are determined that whatever happens, being attacked so treacherously by Philip's seneschals, they are not going to let him have that treasure. And a few of the bravest of the brave will fight the overwhelming attacking force, while others escape with the money that they are not going to allow to fall into Philip's hands.
In the end, at dawn on Friday the 13th, 1307, hundreds of the king's heavily armed troops stormed into the Paris Temple and other Templar strongholds across France, dead set on arresting large numbers of knights, and most importantly, seizing the treasures that they'd stashed away underground.
So just imagine the scene. It's first light on Friday, the 13th of October in 1307, and the forces, Philip's seneschals and all their men, and they respect the Templars. They will have taken overwhelming numbers of soldiers. And the Templar commandery, commanderies, one after the other, are doomed. From the point of view of the seneschal's men, here is a Templar commandery. We're swarming over the walls, we're killing the defenders. We are going to scoop up enormous amounts of treasure, and if there's one thing that our master, Philip le Bel, will thank us for and will reward us accordingly, it's treasure.
According to reports from the time, a huge force of the king's men swarmed into the Paris Temple to be met by a small but fierce Templar resistance. The battle for control lasted several hours before the Templars were overcome and arrested, and the French troops finally reached the underground vault.
This is where the Paris Temple once stood. It's a metro station now, but when the king's forces stormed the fortress, the vaults were empty. Clearly they'd been tipped off and the treasure had been moved somewhere else. The question is, where did it go?
Just before the King's men stormed the Paris Temple, that's when the Grand Templar Preceptor of France, Gerard de Villiers, he had just legged it, basically, and he took with him 50 horses and 18 galley ships. So that's a bit much for just one man. So presumably, wherever he went, and again it's a mystery, he took the treasure with him.
So there must have been something there for the French king to be pretty excited about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's absolutely no question that the Templars had a huge amount of treasure of different sorts, objects of value. No doubt about that. And there's also no doubt that most of it in the Paris Temple disappeared. The question is, where did it go? Who took it? Well, in fact, as it was the guy in charge of the Paris Temple, this Gerard de Villiers, who it was the highest ranking Templar to escape the arrests, you don't have to be Sherlock Holmes to work out who took it, but what we don't know is where it went.
The Templars had a large fleet of galleons based in the port of La Rochelle on the west coast of France. It's possible that the horses and wagons that would have fled from Paris headed to this port, boarded the ships, and set sail before the king's troops had a chance to intercept them. But where this fleet sailed to is one of the great mysteries of the Templar saga. Some historians believe they crossed the Atlantic to North America and even Canada, while others think they sailed up the Channel to the east coast of Scotland and came ashore near Edinburgh. Historian and author Andrew Sinclair, a descendant of the St Clair bloodline, believes he has hard evidence that proves the treasure was taken to Rosslyn Chapel near Edinburgh in Scotland. He claims that depictions of the Ark and other sacred objects resting in the vault of the chapel are shown on a 15th century manuscript called the Kirkwall Scroll, which he discovered in a Masonic lodge on the Isle of Orkney.
So, Andrew, explain to me, what are we looking at here?
This is the shape of Rosslyn Chapel, and in the vaults are buried the Ark of the Covenant and the Holy of Holies.
Wow.
And that is really quite a statement. We see two priests on a pole carrying the Ark of the Covenant.
Wow, okay, yeah.
And we see two other priests worshipping the golden calf. And these are Templar maps of the Seventh Crusade, and they are full of these Jewish symbols from the Old Testament. In the middle, even more remarkable, we have Masonic and Gnostic symbols. We have two cherubim winged guarding the Holy of Holies. And underneath that, we have the straight Masonic black and white and Templar tessellated pavement. That was also the Templar flag. This is the treasure map. It says there are holy treasures in the vault of Rosslyn. It is surrounded with Templar symbols. It's got two Templar Crusader maps on either side. That's it for me.
But for me, the key thing is, what we're seeing here, this is evidence of Templar treasure.
Yes, it's evidence of Templar treasure. It's also evidence that the Templars went into the Freemasons.
Fascinating.
So does Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland really hold the key to this treasure? We know that it was built in 1446 by Sir William Sinclair, whose family had strong connections to the Templar Order, and it's said that it was built to house these relics which were brought back from the Holy Land. The chapel is famous for its enigmatic stone carvings, and then when you add the fact that the floor plan is said to have been modelled on the Temple of Solomon in Jerusalem, well, then you have the basis for a very intriguing mystery.
Since the Da Vinci Code movie was released, which put Rosslyn Chapel at the heart of the bloodline mystery, it's had to fend off hordes of treasure hunters who want to dig up its floors. Ian Gardner is the person whose job it is to deter the wannabe Robert Langdons, and the man to put the $6 million question too.
Is the lost treasure of the Templars buried here under Rosslyn Chapel?
Well, there are stories and theories, but there's not evidence. And so our view at the moment is that no, the treasure isn't buried here.
What do you think is buried underneath the chapel?
It's very difficult to say. We don't have a definitive answer. There are bits of evidence that give us clues. Sir Walter Scott wrote in 1805 about the knights of the Sinclair Knights being buried in the vault. Some 20 barons, he said. So Walter Scott was known to be a visitor around this area. It's quite possible that he did see knights buried there. It may be that the Sinclair Knights are buried in their full armour. We don't know. On the assumption that there might be knights, there might be ancestors there, and it might effectively be the last resting place, the family are not keen to start digging and investigating. And I think that's absolutely right. If it is a resting place, it's about leaving it for people to rest.
But there is a strong Templar association with Rosslyn Chapel.
There are things that point towards it. Some of the carvings do have Templar interpretations. There are stories about members of the Sinclair family having links to the Templars. And of course, we're very close to the village of Temple here in Midlothian, just a few miles away, which was the base, the Scottish base of the Templars. So there are clues, but there's not really that evidence which gives us the definite answer.
Many believe that the stone carvings inside the chapel are its real treasure and its greatest secret. One of the local guides, Anne McNeil, agreed to show me around.
Now, Jamie, just round here, this is the famous part of Rosslyn Chapel. It's the apprentice pillar. This is what everybody comes to see. The famous Rosslyn legend, this pillar right here, with the spiral effect.
And what about the carvings here? What have we got? What are these dragons or something?
At the bottom, it's meant to be the 7 dragons. Is this a representation of, or in honour of the St. Clair's family roots coming from Scandinavia? And the Orkney sagas, etc. So it's depicting a little bit of the family in it. The spiral effect, some people, again, they could maybe try and bring in Freemasonry Templar here. It's the spiral staircase, which you can often see sometimes in their charts and the various degrees. They're learning to be a good Freemason or a good person by ascending the staircase. So that's an interpretation.
And some people believe that there is actually something inside the column, is that right?
Yes, again, the other famous story, mostly coming from Freemasonry here. They will tell you the chapel was a replica of the original Solomon's Temple in Jerusalem, and that was where we got stories of Knights Templar, treasure, Holy Grail. And the chief architect of Solomon's Temple was a grand name, Hiram Abif. Now, he himself, he was murdered by stonemasons or fellow craft stonemasons because it's claimed he wouldn't divulge to the 3 of them secrets of stonemasonry. The best part, and they usually whisper this part, they'll say to you, the apprentice pillar here is not. It's actually the master mason's pillar, Hiram Abif. It's hollow. They think the Holy Grail is hidden in the middle, and perhaps we're standing on all the treasure.
So hang on.
There's a lot.
Well, so what you're saying is that there are the stories that this is where the treasure is buried, under this pillar.
One of the Templar legend.
And the Grail is inside the pillar?
That's what can be claimed, yes.
Is there any way, is it hollow, do we know?
We've had the chapel's been scanned in heat imagery, and the pillars are solid stone.
So no Grail in here?
No.
Do you think there's a chance that the treasure could be underneath Rosslyn Chapel?
Rosslyn Chapel is a very mysterious and interesting place, and it's certainly, when you study its interior and the carvings that are there, it seems to have the hallmark of Templar mystery, that they were undoubtedly closely associated with it. They had loyal supporters there in the form of the Sinclair family, among others, and it seems to me highly probable that they would have felt it was safe to leave some, at least, of the treasure there.
What is buried under Rosslyn Chapel is a hotly contested subject. I submit to you, there is no mystery. By this point, what is down there is well inventoried. So the fact that we haven't heard of what is down there tells me one of two things. Either it's heretical, so it's so controversial that it shouldn't and couldn't come to light, or it's an artifact that shouldn't be in the physical possession of Scotland, such as the menorah. That would have to be returned in a heartbeat. Or if it was something dramatic like the Ark of the Covenant, well, that could unleash the next Third World War. So there's probably a good reason why whatever is there hasn't been revealed.
So what's underneath us here?
A very good question. Above our heads, we have what maybe some people call the keystone, right? It just comes straight to a point up there. We often call it, maybe we have a little bit of fun, we can call it the Grail pointer. Attach a plumb line to it, drop it straight down, and does that tell us where the Grail is hidden? We're standing on top of it.
But the Grail's underneath us now?
We don't actually know that.
Right, okay. Do we know what's buried under here?
No. We've had various scans, etc. There's an indication that there may be some metal. Could it be the Knights of the St. Clair's family? But we're not 100% certain.
Okay, so Templar Knights possibly buried underneath us?
Possibly.
Can't we just dig down underneath the chapel?
Sadly not. What we do think is that there are secrets here. We know that in 1546, Mary of Guise, who was married to King James V and was the mother of Mary, Queen of Scots, she wrote to William St. Clair and thanked him. It was quite an enigmatic letter. She thanked him for sharing the secrets of Rosslyn and promised not to share them with anybody else. Now, we don't know what those secrets are. We might not know what they are, but I suspect that over the next 500 years, people will still come here to try and answer what were those secrets, and it keeps the intrigue and mystery going.
So what does lie beneath this enigmatic chapel? Well, back in the 1990s, armed with his 15th century treasure map, Andrew Sinclair carried out a ground scan and excavation beneath the floors of Rosslyn, and although the results were mixed, it did show that there's a much deeper vault under the church than previously thought.
We had 2 nights, and we took a ground scan from people who discovered oil of it, and they seemed to show there are vaults underneath, we know that. And they seemed to show that the vaults were connected, but there was one side vault I knew of. And we dug down the side, and there were steps going down, apparently, into the vault. There were 3 coffins in there, and a medieval wooden bowl, which I came up later and called the Grail. Well, who knows what the Grail looked like? Could have been a wooden platter. But there was a side wall, and I couldn't get through. And later we put down something called an endoscope, and we drilled right through the middle, and we put down this camera into the vaults. But the dirt all fell in, and that was the end of the endoscope. So I never got through. It won't be done again. And there we are. I'm pretty well certain that some Templar treasures and records are down there, and probably the Holy Rood.
When Rosslyn featured in the Da Vinci Code movie, it really put this remote little chapel on the tourist map. Unfortunately for the guides, It also means that tens of thousands of visitors now come every year looking for the secret archives of the Priory of Sion and the tomb of Mary Magdalene.
What impact has the Da Vinci Code film had on Rosslyn?
It opened the chapel up to the wide world. Our visitor numbers, the year 2006, we went from 30,000 visitors a year to 176,000.
Wow.
That's a dramatic increase. You know?
I remember this bit from this was in the film, wasn't it? Did they?
Very much so. Tom Hanks stops at the top of the stairs and he looks straight ahead at the final clue, which was a 6-pointed star. We didn't have one,
right.
So Hollywood made one in wood and they stuck it on the wall.
That's what it was?
That's it.
Okay.
We don't know about this. Hollywood leave, they pull it off the wall and they left us with it, the circle, which is now known. We've given it a name and we call it the Hollywood Circle. Some of the visitors, when they come down here, they're actually disappointed. They've maybe got a book in hand and they're looking for the spiral staircase, the library. They'll come running back upstairs and they'll say to us, "Where is it?" And we'll say, "Well, what are you actually looking for?" And they'll say, "It's in the book." You know, and then we'll say, "Well, I'm very sorry, we don't have one." And they'll say, no, do you press a button and it just appears? And we'll say, "No, I can't do that. What you see is what we've got." And then they'll say, "We understand it, but we know you can't tell us, it's a secret." But they go away quite happy, I think.
You need to put a little Holy Grail on the end there, just so that when they come down, they'll be happy.
Yes, the wooden cups, we sell them in the shop.
That's as close. Is that as close as we're going to get to finding a Holy Grail in the gift shop?
I would imagine so.
When I was in Jerusalem, I spoke to a lot of people who believed that the Templars did remove treasure from Jerusalem. Do you think that was the case?
Well, what I love about this place is that you can listen to theories, you can listen to views. It's very hard to prove them or disprove them, and I think that's one of the lines that's actually hard to prove. It's very hard to know if there was a connection. But there are legends and stories which would keep the debate going, and I think that's actually the most important bit.
As long as you don't know what's under there, you can keep the mystery going. But as soon as you find the vaults and go down there, you're either going to find there's nothing there, or it's just the tombs, as it's supposed to be. It's the burial vaults. There's more, if you like, more of an industry in not opening the vaults. Because once you've opened it, you know what's there.
What you're saying, Clive, is it's good for business.
Yes.
There's another theory about where the Templars hid their treasure, and it's on a remote island in Nova Scotia. According to the story, part of the Templar fleet that left the port of La Rochelle in France secretly peeled off, and instead of going to Scotland, they crossed the Atlantic and ended up at Oak Island on the west coast of Canada. The legend is that they dug a deep pit, over 100 feet underground, which led to a vast labyrinth of tunnels in which they buried their most precious treasure. It then lay untouched for hundreds of years, until some local lads accidentally discovered a huge vertical shaft in 1795.
The kids went home, came back with digging equipment. They got down 10 feet and hit this platform of oak logs. What they were pulling out was soft, loose backfill, but the walls were hard. It was so clear, so obvious, that it had been dug. It wasn't a natural blowhole. Well, they went down another 10 feet and they hit another platform of oak logs, decided this is more than 3 lads can do. And then one after another, adult expeditions for the next 200 years have been trying to get to the treasure in the Oak Island money pit. And we've been over there a number of times, had tremendously exciting visits. There is undoubtedly something amazing hidden down there. Problem was that the guys who built it, and probably the Templars, had put 2 flood tunnels in, connecting it to the Atlantic. When the diggers went down shortly after the boys, at the start, this would be now of the 19th century, They went through layers of corking clay of the kind that you use to waterproof a boat.
The Templars were known to be great builders, and some people suspect that they constructed this pit with elaborate security measures, including multiple levels of oak logs to break through and direct inlets to the sea, so that when you dug to a certain level, the pit would be flooded by seawater, killing those inside and making further excavations impossible. The man who currently has the right to excavate on Oak Island is Dan Blankenship. And just like those who went before him, many of whom perished in their attempts, he firmly believed that there is a huge treasure waiting to be dug up.
Why did you first come here?
Good question. Never really thought about it too much. I suppose curiosity was a major factor, and get rich quick probably was a major factor. So inquisitiveness, all of those probably.
What do you think is in the pit?
What, value-wise, what they left on the island or concealed, it boggles the mind of the possibilities. My own personal opinion is it would put King Tut's tomb as a very, very small find in comparison. And to date, I think everybody says that King Tut's tomb is the most famous treasure that was ever found. And I think we have something much more valuable on Oak Island.
The Reverend Lionel Fanthorpe has spent over 2 decades investigating the Oak Island mystery and believes that Blankenship and all the other excavators might well be onto something.
What really set the Oak Island mystery alight was the discovery in the shaft of a carved stone, an engraved stone, very curious letters, which were finally deciphered as meaning 40 feet below, millions of pounds are buried. And once it became known that there was a vast treasure there, according to the engraved stone, then one expedition after another set out to beat the floodwater. The legend is that 7 men must die and the last oak tree must fall before the spirit of the island will give up its treasure. And 6 men are dead, and the oak trees have been long gone.
But there's a new twist to the Oak Island mystery. Andrew Goff was contacted by a well-funded professional explorer who claimed that he'd found a tomb of great importance there.
What, over the course of 3 or 4 years, he reported to me is they found in Oak Island, beneath the island, a tubing system connecting Oak Island to a neighboring island. And in this tubing system, in the water, was the preserved body of King David.
His contact told him that he'd managed to dive within a few feet of the tomb and that he'd also found some Templar artifacts on the sea floor. Most importantly, he claimed that there was a great treasure there. The clue to its origin, he told Goff, was one of King David's wives.
There's one very famous wife, and that's Bathsheba. And she, interestingly enough, is the mother of King Solomon. So here you are on an island with relics, including the body of King David, other Templar artifacts, and the mother of Solomon, whose treasure may be hidden there as well. It's a fascinating possibility.
So, could the Knights Templar have buried some or all of the treasure from the temple in Jerusalem under Oak Island, alongside King David and Solomon's mother? Well, like so many claims of so many great discoveries before it, until there's some hard evidence to back it up, it will just be another tantalizing possibility. But what a discovery it would be. There is one final piece of this intriguing treasure quest, and it's in a small man-made cavern under the high street of the market town of Royston in Hertfordshire. Inside are a series of limestone carvings depicting Jesus and the crucifixion, which some people think were made by the Knights Templar after they left the Holy Land. Intriguingly, the cave has an octagonal floor which mirrors the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. So did they, as some think, actually bring their treasure not to Nova Scotia or Scotland, but here to England? Local historian Sylvia Beeman agreed to show me around.
So, how old do we think the cave is?
Well, it could be as early as Neolithic, but I think most of the carvings happened in the 12th and 13th century, which my particular theory, and I have to say it is a theory, that it was associated with the Knights Templar. The reason being, Baldock, which is 9 miles away, is a Templar-created market town. It is recorded that from 1199 until 1254, these Baldock Templars came to Royston for the purpose of marketing, and the market was straddled around the crossroads, a very important crossroads across England. The first indication that this cave might be associated with the Templars is if you look here, you can see a cross with a figure on it, on the left here, yes, and look at the arms of the cross, they are pate, and the pate cross was used by the Templars. And on the right, you can see a symbol. Now that is likely to be Il Mappamondo. That means from the highest heaven to the centre of the earth. And that is seen in manuscripts. Following on, we see this group here, which most of us think is an army. And beneath the army, you can see there is a shield upside down.
This one here?
Yes, a shield upside down indicates that the people for whom it's representing are dead. And this is the area where I think the Knights Templar had to say 40 obits, their prayers, and they were said regularly every day to their dead brethren who were in, or had been in, Jerusalem.
The small limestone cave is said to date back to the 13th century and is literally covered in Crusader and Templar images, including Jacques de Molay, the Templar Grand Master who was burnt to death in Paris. There's also a depiction of what could be Jesus, Mary Magdalene, and controversially a small child. Was this one of the heresies that the Knights Templar were accused of? A belief in the bloodline?
Do you think that the Templars might have hidden treasure in this cave?
I think more than anything, it could have been that the Templars carried jewellery and money up and down the country on a regular basis because they were acting as bankers. For example, they did bring in the word cheque to our language. And Royston is where it's positioned on the roads. So it could have been that the jewellery and money could have come up, for example, from Dover, Strood, London, Royston, and then up to Stamford and York and beyond. And this would have been a very useful place to have kept it hidden so that you could store overnight money and jewels if you were travelling around.
If these carvings were done by the Knights Templar, as Sylvia thinks, then it's possible that this small cave with the octagonal floor was used by them for meetings, rituals, and possibly even for the safekeeping of important treasures, maybe even some of the sacred relics from Jerusalem. Whatever the truth, Royston Cave, hidden away beneath the high street, is a truly fascinating piece of English history.
Do you think, Lionel, that there is still treasure to be found?
Roslyn, I think, is a very likely hiding place, with the Sinclairs having knowledge of what they've got. And Oak Island, I would say, is the strongest suspect of them all. I think because it looked so much like the handiwork of an organised force of Templars who, as they dug those flood tunnels, were almost rubbing their hands and saying, I do hope some of Philip's men come and have a look.
I don't believe there are many, if any, elements of the Templar treasure that are missing. I believe someone knows where each of them are. Sure, some of them may have been melted down, but I think most of them are preserved with what amounts to the Templars' own copper scroll. Someone is looking after these relics somewhere today.
Until the treasure is found under Rosslyn Chapel or on Oak Island or in Royston Caves, the mystery of where the Templars exactly hid their loot will continue to confound those who search for it. I think we also have to consider the fact that maybe the treasure wasn't found at all, in which case it is still somewhere buried underneath this city, just waiting to be discovered. See you next time.